Hi folks, those of you that have come onto the channel from my Facebook page will know that a number of years back I made a machine to help with the hand finishing of my blades, to basically take the repetitive motion out that was causing damage to both my elbows. But while it worked, it didn't work as well as I hoped, and the action of holding the abrasive against the blade still caused strain on the elbows, and so I stopped using it. And I've started doing a lot of oxidized finishes on the blades and bits and pieces like that to compensate for not being able to kind of hand finish them, to polish them. However, I've got a lot of knives hanging up here that are at the stage where they need hand finished. They need rubbed because that was what was specified by my customers. And so I need to get this machine fixed, and that's what I'm doing just now. I actually started stripping, the machine's right here, I started stripping it apart and realised that, should stop making this a project on the channel. So that's what I'm doing here, giving you a brief overview of what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to take some footage of me actually upgrading the machine. So where it went wrong firstly was that the actual wheel, I think it's called a Scotch yoke, the design that I built this on, and there was a lot of friction inherent in the system, and it was causing an overload on the inverter, and it wasn't running properly, and that was a major issue. I've now redesigned that, and I'm going to go for a different system for the push-pull mechanism, and I think this will work a whole lot better. But what that's caused is it's caused a cascade effect on the upgrading of the machine. There was a few things that I wasn't happy about, like the way I was holding the abrasive. I've now developed a system that will be able to be locked off on this new machine, on the new version of the machine. And so I'm hoping by the time I finish this, it'll be a complete upgrade, and I'll be able to get a lot of these knives that have been sitting, my customers very patiently waiting on the knives getting finished, that this will allow me to get them finished. So I'll turn this camera around, I'll show you the state that the machine's in just now, and we'll go from there. As I said, I've been stripping the machine apart, ready for the upgrade and the new bits, but I thought I'd stop here and give those of you who haven't seen it on my Facebook page an overview of how it worked, and tell you what went wrong and what I'm planning to do about it to make sure it works this time. So this wheel obviously rotates, and this bar here attached to this carriage, which turned rotary motion into linear motion by fixing that carriage between two rails here. However, what I found was that at the top and bottom here it was fine, but as it came round, you can see the angle of this bar here, it was producing lateral stresses on this. And although I'd actually milled these to take this carriage, and it ran fairly friction free, and I could squirt it with lubricant and stuff, it just wasn't quite right. And I found that underneath here, underneath the table here, I've got the inverter, and I was finding the readings changing quite drastically, and it turned out that was producing quite a lot of strain on the inverter, and it was stalling out when I clamped the blades to here. When I put pressure on it using you can see in the back there I've got a stack of abrasives and bars, and when I pressed down on that to get the hand rubbing effect, it stalled the machine, and it shouldn't have been able to do that because I've got a 10-to-1 step down gearbox, etc under there, and it should all have worked fine. So basically the system, while it worked, it didn't work as efficiently as I wanted it to. So what I'm looking to do now is change the way it works. So I'm going to change this table surface. I've just arrived back with a sheet of kind of stainless steel, which is going to cover both parts of that. So it's a single piece covering the surface. The wheel is staying the same, but what I'm going to do is these two rails here are going to be mounted each side of the wheel, and there'll be a tethered yoke going right the way across from one side to the other with a slot in it, and the spigot that this bar is attached to will fit inside that slot. Now what that will do is, as the wheel rotates, it will drag that tethered yoke forward and back. Instead of pushing a rod forward and back, it'll pull the yoke forward and back. Onto that yoke I will be attaching this bar, but instead of being at an angle, it'll be permanently fixed perpendicular to the travel, or exactly in line with the travel of the carriage here. So that will take out any of the side-to-side motion of the bar and turn it into purely linear motion of the carriage, which should actually take a lot of those stresses out for the inverter. The other thing I was finding was that while the carriage was moving forward and back and that was doing its job, I was having to hold bars of abrasive like that and let the carriage slide forward and back underneath it. So it's basically lifting, press, lift, press. And it worked, but when the bar was pushing the knife blank forward and back, I was having to put quite a bit of resistance into that, resisting that motion, if you like, which was what causes the scratch marks, but it was still a strain on the arms, and that's what this machine was designed to hopefully stop. So what I've done now is I've got these two parts here, and these are obviously on rails which will slide and adjust. Now that's to allow for the different lengths of blade that I'm going to be clamping to the carriage. I can then adjust that, and I can adjust the width of the stroke or the length of the stroke by shifting that part of the carriage there in and out, and that will make a different length of motion here. That combined with these will allow me to hand rub any size of blade that I make at this current moment in time. The interesting thing is that these are individually movable. They'll be mounted each side of the carriage here, and I can adjust, because they're on slides and they're individual, I can move one forward, one back. I can basically fit them to how I want it to work with the blade, and I can also lock them down. There's holes in there that I can actually put a clamp handle in there and lock it at a certain angle or a certain position, which means I'm no longer actually having to fight the motion of the machine. Those will be clamped and do that for me, which takes all the stress and strain out of actually hand rubbing the blades. And I'm hoping that these modifications that I'm making will make this machine just perfect for the job. So I'm going to finish my cup of tea, I'm going to finish stripping the machine, and I'm going to get the stainless steel sheet up and start looking at cutting the hole out to get the wheel mounted through that onto there. And then I'm going to have to sort out the supports for these two bars here to lift them up to the relevant height so that it clears the setup on the wheel there. So that'll be the next task that I'm doing, and I'll come back with the footage of that once I've got it shot and once I know what I'm doing.